Hello and welcome everybody to the Poker Fuse podcast. It is February 19th, 2020. This is episode number 43. I'm your host, Mike Gentili, along with my co-host, Nick Jones. This week on the podcast, more updates to some of the biggest online poker clients have been announced and rolled out. We'll take you through the highlights. The World Series of Poker has announced its online bracelet events for the 2020 series, and the numbers are on the rise. We'll compare the number of events this year to the years past and discuss the added emphasis of the WSOP on the online game. And finally, Run It Once Poker has had its first birthday. We'll talk about some of the improvements the site has made in its first year and speculate on what could be coming in year two. There have been a few product updates in the online poker world since our last podcast. We've seen things like 6-card Omaha go live, throwable items go live, both of those PokerStars, by the way. GG Poker's added spins. Nick, anything else jump out at you?
Yeah, they seem to be the big ones. It's our kind of regular segment now on the podcast where we just talk about stuff that we've reported, like new product updates, and there's another trio this week, all pretty interesting and worth talking about. So I think 6-card Omaha is perhaps the most interesting. That's live now in the .com market on PokerStars. Could be live by the time you hear this on some of the kind of regional clients like the UK and Russia. Not quite sure the status of them, but that is rolling out globally. As the name would suggest, it's Omaha, but you get dealt 6 cards instead of 4.
Interesting. Any sense on how popular of a game that's going to be? I know we talked about this game when we first found out it was coming, but for the life of me, I can't remember how popular it is.
Yeah, I haven't checked. It only went live like 4 or 5 days ago. I'll be honest, I haven't looked in the client to see how many games of this are firing off, so I'm not quite sure. What's interesting about the launch is that all the games that PokerStars have launched over the last 2 years, from Fusion and Tempest and Deep Water, we've talked about a lot of them on this podcast. They've all launched with quite a bit of fanfare behind them. So, it's got a tab in the lobby. When you click on that, you get a new kind of designed lobby, a blind lobby, where you just kind of hit your binds and click go and a table launches. Then that table itself is going to be styled to fit. There might be custom animations and sound effects to fit the theme of the game. This, which is, I think we probably would have talked about before, which is what we predicted, looks just like a normal poker game. So like any of PokerStars kind of cash game variants that they've had for a long time, kind of legacy niche games, whether it's Courchevel or 5-card Omaha or Badugi, all these games which are still in the lobby today. It's launched like that. So honestly, unless you know about it, you wouldn't find them, which is why I think that popularity-wise, I imagine not a lot of these games are running, just because you would have to dig down into the lobby to find these new tables.
So unlike some of their other recent variants, like Tempest and Deepwater Hold'em, some recent ones, this one is a permanent edition?
Well, my guess would be yes, because just of the way it's being deployed. I guess if it does not find any traction at all, I guess they'll quietly just remove it. But they seem to be happy to, you can still play or try and get going draw, 5-card draw, or 7-card stud, or and even I looked at these 5-card Omaha versions. So they've had it the last 5 or 6 years. They launched 5-card Omaha, and they've got high-low split versions. They've got, and then Courchevel is just slightly different. They've got a high-low split of that. There might even be a limit version of that game. So they've got 5 or 6 different versions of that game. God knows how frequently they run, but kind of 6-card Omaha just adds to that. So I'd be surprised if this gets removed, just because PokerStars does seem happy to keep these niche games running, even if they don't get a lot of traction, because they don't take up any space in the lobby. So yeah, my gut is that they are they're going to be there for the long haul. What's interesting is, to my knowledge, outside of our articles about this, and this is from us spotting it, I see no PR from PokerStars at all. I haven't seen any of their streamers out there trying these games. So I can't see how these games are going to get going unless the word gets out a bit that they're there. I mean, maybe they're just out there as a quiet kind of trial to test things out before they do a bit of a push. But I know in the past when they've done it, they've at least done PR, and you might see some streamers, playing them. It'd be interesting to see if this gains a lot of traction. I mean, as you would imagine, 6-card Omaha, as the name would suggest, is just like 4-card Omaha, except you get dealt 6 cards, so you still have to make the best hand out of 2 in your hand, 2 of your 6 in your hand, and the 5 on the board. As you can imagine, it's going to be a very loose a game. I mean, 41 of the 52 cards will get dealt out by Showdown if you got a full table. Yeah. So and so pre-flop equity is going to run crazy close together. Obviously an action game if it takes off. I think it's played in pot limit format. It's the only one spread at the moment. But yeah, so that is live now. We will see if people play it at all.
Okay, well, speaking of trials, we talked about recently these all-in sit-and-goes that PokerStars was trialing. Not all in or fold, just every person all in every hand. How is that going?
Yeah, so from what we can tell, it's been removed. This came launched quietly, again only spotted by us and written and talked about by us. It was in Spain only, as you say. Basically lotteries, you enter, you don't even have to be present, everyone goes all in, somebody wins. Sit and goes, these on demand, and perhaps most controversially with quite a high rake. We talked about a lot of that I think last week. Anyway, they launched. Within a day or two, the tab had been removed, but the games were still present. And we think 5 or 6 days later, they were removed. And now today, they are not there at all. So yeah, not quite sure if we just killed it from talking about it on one podcast, or whether it was this tiny trial to see what happened. I mean, very few of these games did fire off. I mean, we did actually see, interestingly, they started removing these tables, but one stuck around for 24 hours because 2 people were sat in it trying to get the game going, and it never fired off. And ultimately they did that remove that last table and the game is gone. So I guess my guess would be that that's it, and that we're not going to see that again. And we spent 10 minutes talking about it last week, and now it's over, and most people never would have got to play it. But yeah, I mean, maybe that was it. Maybe to see the first initial reactions from people.
Yeah. Okay. Well, PokerStars, we also saw another update from them. Throwable items, something that was or is available in the PokerStars VR product, has made its way now via Aurora to the main client. What do we know about that? Where is it available? What can you throw? What are the details?
Yeah, so this is only available in Italy, and it has actually been quietly enabled in Italy for a long time, or a few months at least, but we only finally got to test it ourselves, and so we did an article on that this week, and a post on F5 about it, so it's got some wider attention that this exists. And yeah, it's not it's not a new kind of mini game or game type or anything. It's literally as it would sound. Sat at the table, you can throw a fish at your opponent, or a frying pan, or a couple of other things. I can't quite remember what they are. So it's just a fun little thing that you can have. It's also not new, as you say. PokerStars have got it in VR. 888 have classically had it for years and years and years, that you can throw items at your opponents. So it's just it's just a bit of fun, a fun thing to have. The interesting thing is, I think, how well this is implemented. So I know Aurora, their new game engine, has a lot of critics from poker players, from just my own personal experience, and definitely as a casual player now, I think it's a big step forward. What they can do in terms of higher fidelity games, better sound effects and animations, it's much improved, and you can see that through the novelty games that we talked about before, the way they've rolled out things like Tempest and stuff like that. They're much more engaging games, and throwable objects is a really good example of that. These are fun to play with. Like, when you use it, you fire like this crosshair at your opponent, and they light up, and this big arc shows up where you throw it, and it follows that arc, and you get sound effects, and it's fun to use. So it's a good example of what they can do. As I say, it's interesting that they haven't deployed this wider. It's been live in Italy, what we think is weeks, if not months. I think it's 2 or 3 months. So Why this hasn't gone wider, I'm not sure. I don't really see any downside. The only other thing we know is we think that you only get 2 initially, and to unlock the other stuff to throw, maybe you have to complete missions or achievements. But we couldn't quite work out how we did that for ourselves. We only had 2 unlocked. But yeah, so that is live now on all tables in Italy for at the real money tables, tournaments, cash games. It's all there.
So can the rest of the table and like the target of the person that's being thrown at, can they see all this animation and sound effects too? They know this is happening?
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually threw something to somebody, and they chatted back at us and threw something back at us. So but obviously you have to have Aurora enabled to see this. And I imagine that I think it's default now everywhere, but I think you can still switch back, I believe, to the regular client. I will also say I should mention that Party Poker has added this to mobile, and they plan to expand this to desktop as well. And it's also available and potentially inspired by a lot of the Asian sites like PP Poker have stuff like this. So, so people can definitely see it if something gets thrown at you.
Okay. We also saw an announcement about GG Poker adding some new game formats. What do we know on that front?
Yeah, so this is going to be their second attempt at a lottery sit and go, jackpot sit and go type game, perhaps better known as like Spin and Go on PokerStars or as Espresso on Winamax, spins on Party Poker, etc. So GG Poker have had a game in the past in this style called Fortune Gold. Hang on, let me look it up. It doesn't matter. But anyway, that didn't last too long and it was canned. It was quite, won't get into details of how it worked, but it was quite different, should we say, to other games. So then their new game coming out is called Spin and Gold, and that's going to be, it's got a few interesting twists, but it's mostly going to be much like you get with other games, much less kind of twists to what they had before. So it's going to be 3-handed, winner takes all, random prize at the top, etc., etc. Looks like their highest prize is going to be 12,000 times the buy-in, which seems to be like an industry standard. They're going to have buy-ins up to, I think, for $50 is their highest buy-in, we think, initially. They're going to have 1, 5, 20, and 50. So a top prize at the top one is $600,000. And that is going to launch in a couple of weeks' time, I think. At the end of this month, that's going to go live.
Do we have any indication if this is going to be a blind lobby type game for them?
Yeah, I see. I mean, I can't really see how this game would work without it, and that's what everyone's done. Yeah. So yeah, certainly it's going to be like a blind lobby type deal.
Okay, well that I think that puts a bow on all of the product updates. Or is there anything else?
Well, we should touch on briefly what we think is going to be slightly different with these Spin and Gold games. So although like the main standard tournament itself will be normal, they've got 2 interesting twists. So one of them is just going to be like a built-in challenges system. So when you start the game, you can say, right, I'm going to play for 1 hour, and then you can choose a target to aim for. The amount of gold you're going to mine in this game is the kind of naming they're going to use for that. And you earn gold by playing high buy-in. The high buy-in tournament, you earn more gold, and if you place first, you win more gold. But any finished position, you earn gold. And if you play for your set number of hours, then you're going to unlock an extra prize. And I think it can equate to like 30 to 50% extra rake back, I think, if you hit those targets.
Wow, that's significant.
Yeah, I hope that I've got that right. I mean, I think what's interesting is from the screenshots is that like you can be like, right, I'm going to play a 6-hour session. So it seems to be really encouraging kind of big grinder sessions from these. Maybe it's just something they want to get the games going and get them running, so they're really encouraging people to commit for long play periods. But yeah, just looking here, all we've seen is the PR screenshots that they sent around, but it says that you go like, right, I'm going to play for 1, 2, 3, 5, or 8 hours, and then when you click on one, so the example they've got here, I'm going to play for 3 hours, and then you're like, right, I'm going to shoot for mining 3,000 gold. And if you do that, you get $10 back, which is apparently 48% cash back. And in fact, yeah, it goes up to like 63% cash back. Maybe those numbers are inclusive of the existing rewards, but I mean, either way, that's pretty rewarding play. But I guess it might be hard targets to meet. You know, maybe that's a lot of tournaments and a lot of like first and second places.
So do players have the ability to customize those targets, or is this just dependent on the number of hours that you intend to play?
Well, so you can't customize it exactly, but you can choose from what looks like 1 in 6. So the example they got here is 3 hours. Then you've got 6 different targets. So anything from 700 gold to 27,000 gold. So yeah, you decide what you're going to shoot for, basically. But yeah, the absolute top one they've got here is like $120 extra in rewards. But I'm guessing that's extremely hard to hit. 27,000 gold mine. I'm guessing that's a lot of multi-tabling.
Yeah, I wonder if there's an advantage to underestimating or overestimating your target.
Yeah, and that's going to be the interesting thing for players to discover, isn't it? You go for a high target, but then does it? And again, I think it's going to be luck based because you earn more for first place and then for second place, and you do get some for a last place, but not that much. And so, you need to run well in those as well. Or if you don't, then maybe you have to fire up extra tables. So it kind of will be incentivizing people to maybe move out of their comfort zone and also play higher stakes. So you can start off planning to play the $5, but if you're not going to hit it, there's that encouragement to step up to a higher buy-in, which rewards more gold.
Okay, well, that's definitely an interesting development coming from GG Poker. I was a bit surprised when we discovered a while back that they didn't have any kind of lottery-type spins in their product already.
Well, what we even more surprised about, they don't have any sit and goes. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
So
right,
yeah, they didn't until. Yeah, they don't have sit and goes or spin and goes now, and it looks like they're just adding spin and goes. And yeah, so the other, worth just touching on, the other interesting thing they're adding is they seem like they're going to have some kind of side bet that when you play the game and the spinner's turning to pick what your top prize is, you can take insurance on that. My guess is you take insurance on if it just comes up like a 2x prize. So there's a little message in this screenshot saying, don't let a $2 prize hurt your bankroll, and you can get your buy-in back. So I'm guessing it's a small side bet, where it's like if it does come up a 2x multiplier, you get your buy-in back. Which is interesting. Which is interesting. I think we've definitely written about, and I think talked on this podcast in the past about both PokerStars and Winamax have run promotions to reward the 2x prize. So we talked about Winamax Monopoly a few months ago, and Winamax have always done this as like on a 2x thing, then you collect a card, and if you fill up your board, your bingo board or whatever, you get a prize. So it makes that 2x not feel like a waste of time and you've lost out already. And so it looks like rather than that, and I think this is pretty clever of GG, they're saying like, okay, you can insure against that happening. So it's all going to come down to, I don't think they're going to be offering that insurance for free. That's going to come at a cost. Yeah. So how much do you want to insure against just getting a 2x? It'd be interesting to see how they price that and how popular it is.
And on average, what's the percentage of 2x that come out? Like 60 or something? Yeah.
Well, yeah. So we don't know with this. Haven't seen the kind of pay table for GG Poker, so we don't know the effective rake of these games. For the traditionally, it's hard because everyone's recently rejigged them and made the mid levels more frequent and taken down that top prize.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's. For most sites, I want to say it's not over 50%. So most games aren't 2x, but it's still by far the most frequent. So it might be like 30 or 40%. I'll be honest, I don't have one up in front of me, and I say they have recently changed, so I could be a little off on that. But yeah, you're looking in that kind of area.
Okay, well, it will definitely be interesting to see the players and their feedback and what kind of strategy they develop around these new games at GG Poker.
So we're on the ramp up to the World Series of Poker 2020, and we're in that period, those couple of months where WSOP do a good job of keeping everyone on their toes, releasing once a week a little snippet of a new part of their schedule to get people excited. A big one, and perhaps the most interesting for us as journalists of online poker, is they released their full schedule for the online bracelet events. Mike, what are the top line things we've learned?
Well, first of all, we're going to see a pretty sizable increase on the number of online bracelet events from last year. And that number has been steadily rising since they first started offering online events, I think back as far as 2015. But this year, there will be 14 online bracelet events, which is up from the 9 that were offered last year.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible how much they're putting into online. I mean, we don't know how many total bracelets events they're going to be. It's looking like it's going to be around the 100 mark. I think we're at I think they've announced 80 to 90, something like that, but we expect a few more.
Yeah, I think it's just at 90 or just over 90 right now, with still more to come.
Yeah, so, I mean, we're looking right now close to like 20% of their Bracelet events are going to be played out online. It'll probably work out at more like 15%. But still, I mean, that's, particularly for people who are bracelet hunting, that's... in years past where it's been, I mean, it was 1 for the first couple of years, right? And then I think we had 3 and then 4 and then 9 itself was, more than double. We're getting to that point where, it's a real chunk of the schedule.
Yeah. I mean, 14 bracelet events online is huge. It seems like they're putting a lot of efforts into their online product. They've announced that they're running online circuit events now. There's also another online series. I think it's a free buy series that's running in conjunction with those online circuit events. And then there's non-bracelet events that will be held during the World Series of Poker this summer. The Online Championship Series, I believe, which was also run last year, is just more evidence that they are putting a lot of time and effort into the online product. And I have to assume it's because of the popularity.
Yeah, I know last year they paid out nearly $10 million across the 9 online bracelet events. So they had a really big turnout. And yeah, I mean, and it's great to see that level of investment when, of course, there is still this cloud hanging over of the Wire Act reinterpretation, and there's always the chance that New Jersey players won't be able to play in the tournaments held in Nevada. Obviously, they're confident that wouldn't be the case, I guess, to be announcing such a widespread.
Well, the way that they've mitigated that risk is by not attaching any guarantees to these online events, and which is not new this year. It was the same last year. There were no guarantees. I would assume in part because of the uncertainty surrounding the Wire Act and whether or not the players in New Jersey will be able to participate. But even if they don't, I don't know, looking at the numbers now, we don't have a breakdown of how many entries came from New Jersey as opposed to Nevada, but I would assume that these events will be fine to run without guarantees, regardless of the outcome of the Wire Act.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, so we've gone from 9 to 14 events. Are there any in particular on the schedule that are different to last time, new additions?
Well, yeah, there is one that is very different, and that is the first ever 5-figure buy-in, a $10,000 buy-in super high roller event. So that is new on the schedule this year. There's a wide variety of other events as well. The prices for the buy-ins, I think, and I don't have it up in front of me, I think start as low as like $400. There's PLO events. There's just a wide variety of games to choose from the online product, which is encouraging to see.
Yeah, I mean, that 10K super high roller, I mean, we can only imagine, I can only hope that like some pretty big name people will be in town to be grinding the live event will be attracted to play that. Particularly if they're satelliting a lot of people in, that's going to be one of the softer 10K super high rollers, in the WSOP schedule, you would think. Yeah,
it should be. I would imagine that they are prepared for the number to really skyrocket for these online events too. I would hope that everything is in place for that to go off without a hitch, because if the popularity continues to rise as it did last year, again this year, these events could prove to be very very popular, I guess, have a lot of entries.
Sure. Cool. Well, that's, the WSOP 2020 online schedule is fully out. The first event, just looking up here, the first online event is May 31st, which I think is the day that the live series kicks off as well. So it starts off with a fairly straightforward $400. Oh, I'll tell you something else that jumps out to me just looking at this schedule now, is they have 3 freeze outs as well. I think they only had one last year, maybe 0, because I think we talked about that a couple of weeks ago about their attempts to address some criticisms from some members about the number of entries. So on the schedule, there's 3 freeze outs, and all but one of the remainder are just 1 re-entry. There's 1 3 re-entry, which is the 7-handed PLO, but all the others are just 1 re-entry. So that's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I also noticed that they have a period of time right before the 4th of July where I think it's like 8 events in 8 consecutive days for the online bracelet events. So that should be an interesting time of the WSOP this year.
Yeah, so yeah, kicks off on May 31st, and then there's a week gap. Then there's 2 on the June 7th and June 9th, June 14th, so it's just at the weekends. But then it really kicks off, as you say, June 28th. They've got one every day through to July the 5th, including the Super High Roller, including the 3K. Look like they're all no limits. There's a no limit hold championship in there as well. So yes, that's 1 week solid block, which is cool because I mean that's going to overlap the start of the main event, I would guess.
Yeah, usually does. The main usually starts on or around the 4th of July break.
Yeah, so that's really attractive. If you're obviously coming into town to play that is, and you could be at the table playing live and firing up these every day. If you're bracelet hunting, you're going to be playing all of these, I imagine, a lot of the $400 or $500 mark, and they go through to the July 12th. And then at the same time, as you mentioned before, there's going to be the online championship events as well, multiple tournaments every day with guarantees, I imagine. So yeah, loads and loads of action online at WSOP over the summer.
The new online poker room, or I'm not even sure if we can call it new now. It's just reached its 1-year birthday. Run It Once Poker, 1 year out and about live. Nick, what have been some of the highlights and things that people should know about the 1 year of operation of Run It Once?
Yeah, it's certainly been a tumultuous year for Run It Once Poker. I would say at their 1 year anniversary mark, they're in a much stronger position than they have been, I would say, since they've really launched. They've got the best client that they've had. They've made some critical improvements over the last 6 months, a string of updates. They've become much more frequent, fixing a lot of bugs and adding some essential features. Does it still have a long way to go? Yes, but I think it's if you play it now, then you'll certainly see a much improved product to a year ago. Cash game traffic is almost at an all-time high. It's basically back to the real flurry of activity we saw in the first month of it going live. It's back to those levels and pretty steady. So where it is today is very good. It's certainly been a tough year getting to this point, though.
Okay, so we have 2 options here. We could look back at some of the highlights over the past year, or we could look forward as to what might be coming. Which one do you want to do first?
Well, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time looking back, I guess. I think after the initial flurry of activity, I think the clear problems and limitations of the client were thrust into the spotlight, and the team spent the first 6 months just, I think, grinding away, trying to, rather than, work on fun, exciting features that they know they need to grow, like a mobile client or Sit and Goes. They're still not live today. They had to spend months fixing, I think, some pretty serious internal issues, which slowed down their development pipeline a lot. So initially they had real problems with basic stuff like huge pauses between hands, an unreliable client, and then just adding basic things like hand histories, commitments that they made just took a really long time. So, and then during the summer, traffic slipped down to almost dormant levels, and things looked pretty bleak. But I mean, since around like September time, with the growing increase in online poker traffic seasonally anyway, they've done extremely well in terms of client updates, getting to that stable position. And then they made some important changes as well, like their rewards program. Splash the Pot was very cool when it first launched, but ultimately big grinders wanted weekly cashback and didn't want to have to fight for their rewards program. So they made that change with the Legends rewards program. That did very well. And then we had the Phil Galfond challenge, which for Phil Galfond did not go according to plan, but in terms of site traffic only helped in really showing the platform off to other people. And that really helped kick traffic up as well.
What is the current status of Phil's challenge? I saw that he threw the towel in, I believe, or did it end on schedule?
Well, the last thing I checked, I haven't seen anything in the last 24 hours, so I may be behind. But the last thing that I saw was that he had put pause to the challenge. So the way it was is that they had an agreement that you can pause and skip a day and have to pay a fine to the other person of I want to say 6,000, but I was listening to the Pocket Fives podcast, the Fives, and they said it was 3,000. So maybe 3,000 euros a day if you want to just skip a day. And they already had I think the last week of this month booked off because one of them had travel plans. So Phil down 900,000 euros after I think about a third of the way through the challenge, something like that. I mean, it's been an incredibly, even if he's at a huge negative expected value, 10 big blinds per 100 or something insane, that's still running extremely bad. And I think most would agree now that probably Phil doesn't have an edge in the game. But even so, it's still 80% bad luck, So down almost €1 million, he decided I'm going to pay the fine for the next 6 days. We then had our scheduled 7 days off. That gives me time to really look back, reflect, and decide on whether I continue with the challenge or not, and just call it quits.
Do we know who the next one up is? Is it Bill Perkins?
Yeah, so when I've looked at the order of play, the next one is the Bill Perkins Thirst Lounge game, which you definitely think would be an easier spot for him. It also has a cap on the maximum loss of one person at, I think, 400,000 euros. So I don't think he literally can lose 900,000 euros in the Bill Perkins one. I think the worst case scenario is losing the 400k and then paying a 400k side bet. So I think he laid in 4-1, 100k to Phil's 400. So he can't do worse in the next challenge if it is the Bill Perkins one. But of course, the schedule could always change. I guess I'm not sure if Phil's locked into doing these other challenges. He might back out of all of them, but yeah, that has been pretty damn brutal for him. But it did bring a lot of people to check out Run It Once, and it's not like traffic has skyrocketed to the levels of, Party Poker 888. But in the evenings there are a bunch of tables running, No Limit Hold'em and PLO.
Okay, well, looking forward into year 2 for Run It Once, what are some of the things that we can expect? I know you mentioned that sit and goes, for example, is something that's on their roadmap that they have yet to implement. Do you think we see that in year 2, or is that going to be a little bit farther out?
It's got to be. It's got to be year 2. I mean, it's meant to be their next update. I mean, I hope it's very soon. I remember back to something that Alex Scott said to us on our last special edition PokerViews podcast, which if you haven't listened to, you should definitely go and check out. It's a few weeks back. You'll find it in the archives, but real wide-ranging chat. But we talked about Run It Once briefly, and he said, I'm very impressed by how well they've done given how limited their potential subset of players is. They don't have a mobile client and they don't have sit and goes, and that's just such a smaller segment of the a possible market. The numbers really vary, but a lot of operators talk about the vast majority of their customer acquisition, like 70% plus, come through mobile now. And then, we know that in most markets, tournaments outstrip cash games, by like 70%, 30%.
Right.
So just on the really crude format, you could say like Run It Once have literally got 30% of 30%. So like less than 10% of the market that the other operators work in. And so when you look at it that way, it's really going to be a tough struggle for them. Now, definitely mobile players aren't going to be doing the volume of of desktop players, and people are going to transition from mobile to desktop, so you can't be that broad. But we can absolutely say with confidence that Run It Once have got a very small potential segment when they're going up against the other operators. So until they've got a mobile client and sit and goes, they will always be struggling. So they need sit and goes next, absolutely. I really hope they are working on a good mobile client that launches on Android and iOS this year, because again, if they don't, just from a customer acquisition standpoint, they are always going to struggle.
What about MTTs? I know that MTTs are a bit trickier because they do require very high liquidity in order to be able to offer some of these big prize pools. Is that something that we expect to see in year 2, or is that something that's probably a ways down the road, if on their roadmap at all?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely need MTTs as well. I think even if obviously your guarantees are never going to be what PokerStars, Party Poker, etc. can advertise, just having just a €1,000 guaranteed Sunday tournament is enough to people to be like, I like Run It Once. That'd be a cool thing. I'll make sure I'm in on Sunday, or if I'm watching TV, I'll fire up that tournament and see how well I do. Although they're larger, Unibet Poker, they're 4 or 5 times larger. So, pretty significant, maybe more. But they have a big slate of daily guaranteed MTTs that are very successful. I think it's just a case of, sit and goes are like MTTs, but simpler. So, start with the sit and goes, make sure they work. And then the MTTs, you just have to add on, table rebalancing, and you have to add on final tables, and you have to add on, more complicated payout structures, maybe late registration, scheduled tournament breaks, and then multi-day tournaments and phases and all this stuff. So it's just like, start with the sit and go product, make sure that works. And again, you can launch a sit and go product with like, right, we're just going to have €10 buy-in 6 max no limit hold'em tournaments. Do you know what I mean? Just that, and launch that, and make sure they run, and then add in a €50, and then maybe a multi-table. So there's a nice ramp up there. So I hope once they get the sit and goes going, it's a pretty simple ramp up to the MTTs. Yeah, 100%. I think it needs to be on their roadmap for year 2.
And then some things that may be beyond year 2 are things like spins or fast fold games. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're interesting ones because they could definitely make an argument that they don't want them at all, because they might consider them too damaging for the the ecology of the player pool. Spins in that regard are very attractive, and I think Unibet held back on them for a very long time, but have found a lot of success with their Hexpo products, and have said to us in an interview that if they'd known how massive they would be, they would have launched them earlier. They were very hesitant, worrying about liquidity issues. Fast Fold's interesting because Run It Once could have launched with Fast Fold only. I think that's an option because it's ultimately just, it's a different poker experience, but if you're going basically fully anonymous anyway, in terms of table rebalancing, it fixes the problems of tables constantly breaking and running. They opted not for that, and I think you probably need quite a decent cash game liquidity to offer both at the same time. So like blind lobbies and anonymous tables is like, I don't know, 2 of the 3 steps to Fast Fold, right? Fast Fold then in additionally has, okay, you change players every time, and Run It Once does have you can build up reads on people, so you lose that out, but you gain the table balancing thing. So I wonder if they add them at all, just because I feel like the decision was made not to go with them at the start, but it's definitely something that we'll see. But we could potentially see. I think before that, other game types, I think like just from Phil and knowing his experience playing, I wouldn't be surprised if he would like to add like mixed games in there, or some of the, maybe Omaha 8 and stuff like that. So other game variants might be higher up on the list, but I'm purely speculating there.
From a development standpoint, do you think that is more time intensive than something like sit and goes or MTTs?
I would say that, I don't know. I think sit and goes and MTTs are probably a big hurdle to cross. My gut is adding in something like, Omaha 8 or limit games is probably less, because probably the way they've designed like their poker logic, it wouldn't be too hard to add in. But just with sit and goes and MTTs, it's new UI. That's a lot more UI. You need tournament lobbies, you need to be able to register and unregister and all this extra user facing stuff, whereas when you're adding in let's say we're just adding in Omaha high low, from the user perspective is exactly the same, and it's just that some, pots get split. So it's much more of a server thing. And then even adding in something like, I don't know, 7-card start, right? Okay, so you need to be able to show up and down cards in front of the user. But again, it's still mostly server logic. It's the same buttons and all that. So, but the thing is, you have to have sit and goes and MTT. So like they've got to come next, even though it's a bigger step. I mean, mobile could be huge undertaking depending on their code base. And how much of that can be ported to mobile experiences, but again, it has to be done. So even though it's not low hanging fruit, they've got to be plucking them from the tree regardless.
All right. Well, a big happy birthday to Run It Once Poker, turning 1 year old, and we're looking forward to seeing what's in store for us in year 2. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Poker Fuse podcast. As a reminder, please give us a like and a subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also follow us and interact with us on Twitter. Nick is at PokerProJones. I'm at SpookyBugs. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.